we are. Welcome to the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society's Beginning Gardener Series. Today we are talking about mulch and a little bit about compost because they're so closely related. And then we're going to talk about all the stuff that's happening in the garden and what we should be starting about now. So let's go right to mulch. And if you get your questions out there, get them into the chat, because Cassidy is doing a wonderful job of monitoring them and making sure that all of your questions get answered. So what the heck is mulch? And why do we keep saying, well, mulch your garden, mulch this, mulch that. If you mulched, you wouldn't have blossom end rot. If you mulched, you wouldn't have this disease and you wouldn't have that disease. You wouldn't have, well, I guess it would be easy to understand if you just use the word insulation instead of mulch, or when you're using mulch as a verb, insulate, because mulch pretty much is a covering that you put over the soil to insulate the soil. So it could be because what you want to do is you want to make the soil warmer, or you want to make the soil cooler, or you want to make the soil stay more evenly moist. All of those things you would do by putting down some kind of an insulating blanket. Now, let's go with totally nuclear. I've got horrible weeds. I can't stand it anymore. I'm going to put down black plastic in between my plants because then I know the weeds aren't going to come up. Okay, what are the advantages of the black plastic? Well, black plastic is black and it's plastic. So if I'm putting down black plastic over my soil, absolutely no sunlight is going to get down through that black plastic into the ground. So magically, the weeds will not germinate. If black plastic is laid on the ground, black by its nature is absorbing the sunlight, converting it to heat. So I'm going to really heat up my soil. So there are times when it's really useful to heat up my soil, but when it's already 100 degrees outside, not my idea of a good time on a Saturday night. So black plastic is useful in some cases, but will it help to feed the plants? No. Will it help to keep the soil more evenly moist? Maybe yes, maybe no. If I put it down when the soil is already moist, it's going to keep the soil fairly moist. But when it rains, the rain is going to sit on top of the plastic and it's not going to be absorbed by the soil. So what we're doing is actually repelling moisture, and eventually the stuff underneath will dry out because there is evaporation. So if we're using black plastic because we want to heat up the soil and keep the weeds from coming, we have to poke some holes in it strategically where the puddles are to make sure that the water gets down into it. Why would you use that? Well, if you've got a 100-foot row of tomato plants and then another 100-foot row of tomato plants, it's great to lay it down there and just walk away or poke holes in it, put your tomatoes in. And many commercial growers grow that way because it is expeditious and it will get you tomatoes earlier. But black plastic in the home garden, I'm going to have to give that a thumbs down. So what do I like to use in the home garden? Let's think about what I said before about black plastic. Okay, if I am trying to warm up the soil, I want the soil to be a dark color. If I'm trying to cool down the soil, I want the soil to be a light color. So I could use dyed black mulch, which I don't love that stuff, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. I could use dark mulch because it will help to heat up the soil. Or I could use a lighter colored mulch and something like straw or hay, or this is salt hay, and we'll come back to that in a minute too, because that's one of my favorites. It's wet, that's why it looks so dark, but up here it's dark, it's dry and much lighter. And it helps to reflect the light and make the soil a little bit cooler. Okay, enough about the color of mulch. Well, no, we can't say enough bad things about the color of mulch. How many people have run out and bought the red mulch because it just looks so pretty spread on your landscape, or the dyed black mulch? I don't love either of those because kind of they dye them so you don't see what's in them, and mostly they are construction trash. So when they haul away the leftover wood and the leftover plywood and all of that stuff from construction sites, often that gets ground up, or pallets get ground up and made into mulch because it's a good way to recycle the scrap wood. The problem is a lot of that stuff is already been treated, so it's got the it might have, it's not necessarily heat treated, it may be chemically treated, so you really don't know what's in that mulch. So if what you're doing is using it to make your landscape look pretty, then fine, but keep it away from your food crops. Put it in your perennial garden, put it around your annuals, go crazy, but don't put that stuff near your food. That's my personal opinion, not necessarily backed up by total science, but Sally's opinion, so it counts a lot in my book. I like to customize my mulch to what I'm growing. So say I'm growing blueberries. Blueberries like a really acid soil. My soil might not necessarily be acid. So what I have done is I have collected, here, let's move this guy out. Let's play with this guy. Of course, I'm dark on dark on dark, and I finally found, and then the sun went behind a cloud. But this is pine needles. You can see pine needles. So guess where I got that? I got that under a pine tree. And the pine needles are very resinous, and they're very fibrous. So what they do is they last a long time. They don't break down very fast, and they make a nice soft covering on the ground, slowly releasing organic matter that's more acid than not. So pine needles is something that I would use around perennials, or especially around stuff that really likes an acid soil. Strawberries love an acid soil. Potatoes like an acid soil, but blueberries especially like an acid soil. So pine needles last a long time. If you know somebody that's got a couple of pine trees, they're easy to come by, and they break down very slowly, feeding the plants over time.
Sally, what does resinous mean when you say that pine needles are resinous?
You know how when you break pine needles, you can smell them. They smell really strong, and then their sap is sticky. They make turpentine out of pine sap. So by resinous, I mean sticky, and so it is, because it's so sticky and so full of that oil, it's resistant to moisture. So these don't get wet and stay soggy. They and then because of that, they break down more slowly. So
Gotcha.
they're a mulch that you put down. You can put that down in the spring, and it will still be down there, and it'll still be recognizable as pine needles in the fall. So the really nice thing about pine needles and straw and leaf mold, and I'll come back to the leaf mold in a minute, is that what it does is it makes the soil soft. So we've talked about naked soil before, especially when we were talking, when we had the class totally on soils. Naked soils are a bad idea for a lot of reasons. We already talked about when the soil is naked and light is hitting it, then you're getting a lot of seeds will germinate, weed seeds will germinate. But the other thing about naked soil is that when the rain comes down on it and beats down on it, it just beats down on it, it beats it flat. And so then when the sun comes out and dries on the surface of the soil, we've got a crust. So it's hard for our plants to get up through it, and it's also then hard for rain to get down through it. So if we've got a layer of mulch everywhere, as the rain is coming down, it's beating on something really soft. So it's being splashed around and spread and diffused so that the force of the rain is not flattening the soil. So good idea. Also, when we have naked soil and it rains a lot, if you've got a slope, it's going to wash, because the force of the rain coming down is going to wash the soil away. So if we've got mulch on it, it's going to be much slower to wash away, and the mulch will wash away faster than the soil will. So soil as a softener, soil softener, I guess you could call it, a surface softener, it can't be beat. That's and then the biggest reason that we put down mulch is so that the plants, as it slowly rots down, it is a slow release fertilizer. It's like a slow release compost, and I will show that in a minute, how that works, or sort of how it works. But it is continuing to feed the soil while it's beautifying, making the whole thing look uniform. It's keeping the sun out from making the weed seed. So it's keeping the weeds from coming up as much. And it is also nice to walk on when you've mulched the path, and keeps mud down. And when we talked about lead issues and lead dust, because of lead in your soil, and when dust rises, the lead can get onto other things. If we've got a mulch cover down, the dust is not rising. So lots of good reasons to use mulch. And let me show you. Oh, and the other thing that people ask me about is can you use newspaper and paper bags for mulch? And yeah, you can, except that when it's nice because look, when it gets wet, it's very soft and it breaks down, and it's cellulose, it feeds the plants eventually. But the problem with it is that if it is the surface, it is again splashy, so it's gonna pound down and make the soil be compacted, and as it dries, the wind blows and it blows away. So I use it as an under mulch. I put it down to kill the weeds that are in the wherever, and then I cover it up with another mulch, like leaf mold or wood chips or something like that, and then it breaks down and eventually helps to feed the soil while it's keeping the weeds. So it's like an under blanket for the softening blanket that is mulch. I'm seeing a lot of questions pop across there. Is there anything that we must answer before I start talking about the differences between compost and mulch?
We got some goodies. So Zipporah had asked about pest control in the context of mulching, and said that they've had a real issue with rats and voles this summer. They're afraid to put mulch down because they think that the pest might bury in this mulch.
They've had issues with rats and
voles, V-O-L-E-S.
Well, rats and voles, okay, there's a difference. Rats is a different issue. Let's talk about rats for a second. If you're using ground cover as a mulch, like ivy or pachysandra or something that's, that this is this deep, then they could be scurrying through there. But a layer of mulch that's an inch or two deep is not a rat problem per se. Rats are much more interested in a much deeper place where they can make a nest. So wood piles or brush piles or something like that near the garden.
Oh, they dug under my raised bed.
They dug under your raised beds, and it's rats.
Absolutely. I hired an exterminator too. A whole family. Oh my God, it's been horrible.
Okay, I'm really sorry. That is not a norm thing in the garden.
Oh, I mean, really?
People worry about having compost bins because
there was one in there too.
Do you live near restaurants, or are you out?
Not really. I'm in the suburbs, not that close. Okay, I don't know why.
This is a rat story, and we should probably hold the rat stories.
Sure.
Because it's not relevant to the mold.
Sure.
But let's go back to your moles and voles. Moles and voles love to burrow, and they love to be they burrow because they're after the grubs that are in the soil. So can mulch add to your grub problem? The grubs are going to be there whether you've got mulch down or not. They'll just be deeper. So if it looks like the moles and voles are burrowing in the mulch, It's because they haven't had to dig as deep as they used to. I mean, if they were there before, they're there now with the mulch, and they're burrowing in the mulch because the grubs are coming up further because they're comfortable, but the grubs are already there. So we're not attracting more grubs. We're just bringing them closer to the surface. And if what they're doing is burrowing in the mulch to eat the grubs, they're not digging the roots of the plants up.
Okay, so mulch is not an issue.
The mulch is not an issue with the moles and voles.
Okay.
And the rats is a different issue, and we
Sure.
can talk about that out of
Sure,
after
sure.
we get the stuff done. Okay, pests. What I have learned is I don't put if I have my plant here, let's get my plant. I'm a plant. Here's my plant. I have my plant right here. I don't put my mulch up to my plant. You know how you see people, tree volcanoes, where they have a tree and then they've mounted the mulch all the way up? It's horrible, horrible for the tree. You shouldn't be within 3 inches of a plant with mulch, because specifically you don't want, if the mulch is not anywhere close to rotted down, it can be pulling nitrogen away from the plant, and slugs like to hide in mulch, so you want your mulch to be here. Let's pretend that's 3 inches. So 3 inches away from the plant is pretty much nothing is a guarantee that you're not going to get pests. You're going to get pests no matter what, but mulch is not usually a contributing factor unless you have terrible, terrible slug problems, in which case sometimes people having a rougher mulch rather than a smooth mulch is harder on the slugs. And you can also do a circle of diatomaceous earth around to keep the slugs from coming to your plants. So aside from that, I have anywhere in my entire garden ants. I have ants everywhere. I have ants in my shower. I have ants in my garden. So is mulch making the ants worse? Not really. The ants are there. It's just that if the mulch is there and I have a pile of mulch sitting there, the ants will be in it. And when I flip over mulch, will I see ant nests? Probably. But when I flip over the mulch, they all go, ah, and then they go somewhere else. So the ants are there. Unless you want to exterminate the entire world to get rid of the ants, they're there. The mulch is not going to make them any worse. Okay.
Sally, I have one more question before you move on. So Barry is asking, should you mulch before you seed, or should you wait until the seeds have germinated?
I like to, I mulch whenever I have the mulch. And if I have a lot of mulch, I put it down and then I will spread it back and make myself the trench, or make the area where I'm going to put I do not try to plant through mulch, because the mulch is trying to keep the weed seeds from coming up. It will keep the everything seeds from coming up. So if, right now, if I am planting seeds, the mulch, I have the mulch already there in the beds because I'm planting seeds in a bed that's already been used. So I will I'll pull the mulch back and plant the seeds. And then when the plants get big enough, I'll push it over closer. But I like to give it a wide berth while I'm waiting for the seeds to come up. Or I will take a little bit of hay and I will lightly spread it over so the seeds don't dry out. But I'm trying to keep the ground around them from drying out, and that's why I have the mulch between the rows. And then I might lightly cover with the mulch to get the seeds, to keep the seeds a little moist and a little cooler while they're coming up. Okay, so what I want to talk about is the difference between compost and mulch, and when I would want to use compost and when I would want to use mulch. So here I have my very, very complex and expensive soil sifter, which is a plastic tray that the plants came in. So as you can see the grid of it. It's some pretty wide holes in it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dump some compost in it. And then I'm going to put it up, and everything's black, so you can't see anything. So I'm going to hold it up, and you're going to see the stuff. Can you see it coming down?
Mm-hmm.
Say yes, everybody nods.
We can see it, Sally.
Okay, so what is coming down is the very smallest of the particles. And what it's doing is it's separating the stuff that is already broken down from the stuff that is still recognizable as leaves and sticks and eggshells and all that stuff. So what I have done is I have taken, let me see if I can get this closer to the, there we go. I've taken it, and you can see it's rough. This is mulch. The stuff that I sifted out is compost. It's much smaller, much finer, and much more broken down. So what this is much closer to what the critters in the soil can be eating and breaking down quickly to feed my plants. So what this stuff is, the really rough, the big rough stuff, is more sticks and leaves and a chicken bone and some plastic. That's always nice. A bread tag. Bread tags are always good. Mango seeds. A fork. Yes. So all of the big stuff is I call it time release. I put this in the aisles, or I put it in the around the plants as a ground softener. So it is my insulating blanket. And then as this continues to break down, it becomes, it's released much more slowly. And the soil micro critters are still breaking it down, but they're going for the easy to chew stuff. And then when all of that is gone, this will be breaking down. So this becomes a good backup time release fertilizer.
So compost is a slow release fertilizer that you can use for mulching.
Well, the bigger chunks, the bigger pieces, the not digested parts of the compost make a good mulch. The rest of it makes a good soil additive. So what I do is when I'm planting, I take this sifted stuff and I add that in the hole, or add that in the trench when I'm putting the seeds in, because this is already a lot broken down, but still has a ways to go. So it's slowly being released into the ground to feed the roots of the plants. But this other stuff, the big chunks, that is really slow release. So I got slow release and I got way slower release. And I want both because I want to be feeding these plants over time, so that I've got the stuff this stuff is in the ground being instantly fed to the plants as the roots grow. And then I've got the big chunks of stuff that are very slowly being released over. This is like,
it makes me think of,
that's released.
You know how you do succession planting? It makes me think of like succession mulching.
This is like succession. Well, it's succession composting.
Yeah, exactly.
Itself becomes compost. Now, can you take advantage of the natural process of things breaking down? When I can get wood chips, I grab up all the wood chips I can, because generally they're free. And sometimes I go to Fairmount Park and get them, or sometimes I find them. I follow the sound of chainsaws and with my bucket. I say, can I have? So wood chips are broken down trees, and sometimes they're fresh trees, sometimes they're rotted trees, and they're already on their way to being well rotted. But what happens is, as they're breaking down from the big pieces to the little pieces, they need the biology that's in the soil, the little critters, need nitrogen to function. So they get it from the air, they get it from from other plants, they get it from sometimes like from fertilizers. But what they're doing is they're using up nitrogen because they're binding it as they're biting these pieces and making them smaller. They're binding nitrogen into the what's the word I want? Molecules. And so that is then released later in another form. So what they're doing is they're borrowing nitrogen, and they might be robbing nitrogen from the plants. And that's why we don't want to put fresh wood chips right up against our plants, especially against our trees. So But I like to use the wood chips because they make a beautiful pathway. And my balance is not what it used to be. So I like to have a nice level path. So I put down my cardboard. I put down my, or my paper bags. I'm pointing to the paper bags and saying cardboard. I put that stuff down on top of the weeds, and then I put wood chips on top of that. So that is my walkway for the next couple of months. But what I'll find over time is that the stuff on the bottom is breaking down. It's no longer robbing nitrogen from the air. It's no longer pulling nitrogen from the air. It's already established it. So what I can do at the end of the season in the fall is I scoop up all my wood chips, which are now much more broken down, and I throw them into the beds as a form of organic matter. And then over the winter, they will continue to break down and feed the soil. So what I've done is I've taken these dead trees that are otherwise going wherever, and I am using it for the path. It looks nice. It makes walking easy. It keeps mud from forming. It keeps the weeds down, and then it breaks down, and then I throw it in the bed and it becomes fertilizer. So I've got this whole circle of life thing going on that is absolutely fantastic. And all it cost me was sweat, not a lot of money.
Sally, will wood chips make the soil acidic?
No. If you are using nothing but pine trees, because they are so sappy, and because they'll probably have a lot of pine needles in them, that could, but you'll see that when you're looking at the chips, you'll see that a lot of it is pine needle-y. So that's the kind of stuff that you would use around your perennial shrubs, or around, you can use that around your trees, you can use that around especially your blueberries and strawberries. But that's not something that you would want to use pine needle mulch in, pine needle or pine wood chips in a vegetable garden, because they take so long. There are some wood chips that take forever to break down, but you'll notice that in your path when you're moving your wood chips around, when you're walking on them, you'll notice after a month or two that it's starting to look like soil underneath. And what you won't notice if you're using black locust or cedar or pine chips is that they're not breaking down. So if they're not breaking down and they're not looking like soil underneath, then that's not the ones that you would scoop up and put in your beds. You would continue to just use those as pathway because they last a long time. Okay, so let's get the rest of the mulch questions out of the way, because then I want to talk about what's going on out in the garden.
All right, let me review. Judy mentioned earlier that they're reclaiming a weedy area in the far back of the garden and have covered it with heavy cardboard, and that they need to buy mulch to cover it. What's the best choice? Also, why do you need, I'm just like saying this generally, but like, do you really need to mulch it if you have cardboard on top?
Well, kind of, yeah, because the cardboard is ugly, and B, unless you've got really huge pieces of it, it's going to blow away, and it looks dirty. I mean, it's going to blow around the garden, and you're going to have litter all over the garden. So, can you like throw your weed compost, your weeds and stuff on top of it to cover it up? Easiest if you could get a load of chips from somebody. So call around to arborists to see if they are getting rid of wood chips. Right now, in the month of August, you can go to Fairmount Park and get wood chips for free. So to the recycling center. So if you can get, they said if you brought in a dump truck, they would fill a dump truck for you. They have so many chips right now. I'm guessing because of the storms, a lot of trees are down, and they're chipping a lot of trees. So they do have that at the recycling center, and they are just delighted to get rid of it for free this month. So Cassidy
still doing it by
that, she's going to put that in the chat, I think, and I bet she's going to put it in the follow-up letter tomorrow.
Yeah, but I think they're still doing it by appointment. So it's definitely worth a Google to find more
it is.
About the recycle center.
If you can get that for free and get them delivered, because often if somebody's chipping in your area, they're loving to not have to go back to the yard to dump them. If they can find a close place to dump, they don't have to leave the job for very long.
Yeah, I think I put that in the chat earlier. I think Patty had asked about like what's the difference between different types of mulches, or like what's the best time to use the different things. And I think the answer is that use what you have when you have it. There's no perfect or absolute right way to do it.
I mean, like Judy, she says that they're putting cardboard down in the back of the garden where all the weeds are. But what you can do now is you continue to weed, you can throw the weeds on top of the cardboard. You just need to weigh the cardboard down so that the edges are not flapping up when the wind blows.
Sally, this is a really great question that Barry asked. They said, should drip irrigation lines be under or over the mulch?
It depends on what kind of mulch you're using, because drip irrigation is such a slow drip that it is, I would say, where I've seen drip irrigation used most effectively is under black plastic, because the concern is that the ground never gets rained on, and so the plants don't get watered. To use drip irrigation on top of mulch, you'll have to make sure that you check periodically that the ground underneath the mulch is getting wetted as well as the mulch, because if it's dripping very, very, very slowly, it's keeping the mulch nice and moist, but it might not be getting through to the soil. So depending on what kind of mulch you're using, and no matter what kind of mulch you're using, periodically stick your finger underneath the mulch to make sure that you're damp down there. I can't think of any reason it would hurt to put the mulch on top of the drip irrigation, except for every once in a while you run into a leak gets bad, and if it's under the mulch, you're not going to see that. So keep an eye on your drip lines, and if you're mulching on top, check and make sure things are good. If you're mulching underneath, check and make sure things are good. So you're not going to ever just say, oh, stick or stack, done. I did the irrigation, I did the mulching, I can walk away for a month. Can't do that. Good gardeners are out there every day, just sticking their fingers in everything, making sure that stuff is good.
All right, Sally, before we move on to the next topic, can you give us a quick recap on the differences between the colors of mulch, the black, the brown, the red?
Okay, the black, the brown, the red. The black and the red, if they are dyed mulch, are things that I don't recommend putting in the vegetable garden because you really don't know what is in them. There are some mulches that are red because they're cedar chips, and you'll smell that because it will smell like hamster litter before the hamster gets in it, all nice and wonderful like a cedar closet. That is something that breaks down very slowly, so that is something you would put in your perennial or your annual bed, but not your vegetable garden. Best kind of mulch to use in your vegetable garden is stuff that was once either garbage or wood. And not dyed, so nothing artificial about it. And so compost that's sifted, the leavings from the compost. Salt hay is my favorite because it lasts forever and it really does seem to keep the weeds down and the moisture in. The difference between the dark colors and the light colors is using dark colors absorbs more heat. Using light colors reflects more heat. So you use it depending on what you want to be growing and what the weather's like. Right now, which would segue us nicely into what color mulch would we want to be using right now when we're planting our fall crops. But let's make sure we got all the mulch questions answered.
No, take the segue where you can get
Yes,
the segue,
okay.
Sally.
So I am hoping that you can see what I got in front of me. Look what I got in front of me. I got eggplant, pepper. Oh, the eggplant's not here. Somebody stole it already. Okay, I got peppers, tomatoes, red beets. I dug potatoes last week. The tomatoes are coming in. I love this little spaceship, my little spaceship patty pan squash. Zucchinis and yellow squash are in. What else is in out there? Lots and lots and lots of stuff just starting to come in. I have gotten endless questions about why do my tomatoes have no flowers? Why do I have no tomatoes? Why are my pepper flowers falling off? All of this is the weather. They promised me that they would send out more flowers later. I got a note from the tomatoes. They called me. They said it was just the heat was too much, and they just dropped it all to just hold in and recover from the heat. So the flowers will come again, and the peppers will get flowers, the tomatoes will get flowers, and yes, you will get tomatoes. For those who are really slow on the tomato flowers because they either don't get enough sun or they planted later than they would have liked or whatever, their tomatoes are 100-day tomatoes instead of 45-day tomatoes. You will be the ones bragging about your tomatoes in September when everybody else is just looking at green ones or dead plants. So the plants have a life expectancy of whatever. And so the ones that are pumping out the early tomatoes, it's a very rare plant that will pump out all these early tomatoes and continue all the way up till frost. They do their best and then they peter off. And then those of us that got our stuff in too late, or what we thought was too late, our tomatoes are then coming in. So we're going to have the beautiful plants and the beautiful fresh looking tomatoes instead of the gnarly lumpy ones that everybody else is getting because their plants are past prime. So those of us who are out there sad because our tomatoes are not pumping them out yet, rest on your laurels. You'll get them in the fall. So it's the same thing with the zucchinis, the cucumbers. Everything is dependent on the weather. And so when we had those really, really blastingly hot days, if they weren't able to keep, they dropped everything and said, we'll start over when the heat breaks. So what can we be planting now? And what kind of mulch should we be using? Okay, these are a thing of the past. We planted all of these already and we're done with them. So, except for potatoes. I'm still planting, I just planted a few more potatoes. And I am hoping to get, they won't be big by fall, but I'll get new potatoes for fall. So I'm happy about that. I'm excited. So, oh man, I made up all these really beautiful little jars of leaf mold. Leaf mold is a very nice mulch. And it's my leaves from last year that I ran over with the lawnmower, and then I put them in bags because I wanted to be using them in my compost bin. Didn't use them all up. So, so I am using them now as mulch in the garden because they'll break down once they've been exposed to the soil. The earthworms will be coming up and pulling them down into holes. They'll be so happy. And then this is I don't know if you can see this. This is that's my worm compost tea, my worm from the bottom of the worm bin. And I'm going to be adding that to my watering can and watering my new stuff as I put it in. So what is this new stuff that I'm putting in? I'm going now into the fall season and I'm excited because usually I have a much better fall garden than I have a spring garden. And I'm wondering if maybe I shouldn't move the camera because it's so dark. Why is it so dark here? Can you see this okay? Cassidy, can you see these?
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, okay, because it looks really dark on my monitor. I have been able to acquire, because I'm relentless, my garden center has already fall crops. So what fall crops are is my cole crops, my cabbage family. Actually, they're the mustard family, but we say cabbage family because everybody thinks of mustard and they think about Goldens, and it's like, why am I growing Golden's mustard? So these are the cabbage family, and I've got cabbage, I got cabbage, and I've got several different kinds of cabbage, and I'm reading the tags. Cabbage and collards and Swiss chard and lettuce, these are things that really don't care about the frost. So they, the summer crops, these guys over here that we've been picking, they are totally, once the frost hits, boom, they're gone. Unless we do really elaborate things to keep them going for a couple more weeks, because sometimes we get that burst of summer after we've had a frost. It's like, you know, the irony gods are ruling. So we get, once Halloween comes, because that's our frost, once Halloween comes, boom, they're gone. So this is the next kingdom to come. They don't care about the October frost. They don't care about Thanksgiving. What they care about is they aren't particularly enamored by 20 degrees. So when 20 degrees comes along, these guys really need to be either blanketed or mulched with hay or something to carry them through that week of 20 that we get that kills everything, and hopefully come out the other side. Or we get them in so that when that 20 degrees comes, which usually comes, I would say, I like to say it comes in January, so after all of the holidays are said and done. But last year it came like a week after our first frost, so we got this crazy cold couple of days in November that surprised us all. So we're going to talk about, we will have a workshop in October to specifically talk about what we do for things like that. But for now, what we're doing is we're looking at these cabbages, and I'm going to do the math, and I'm going to say I would like to have cabbage by Thanksgiving, because I want to make sauerkraut in November so that I've got it for Christmas time, because, well, actually I love sauerkraut all the time, but I'm going to want to have, so let's do the math. So if it's like, it is where is it? We're in the middle of August. So middle of August to the middle of September is 30 days. To the middle of October is 60 days. To the middle of November is 90 days. So doing the math backward, I want to get something in here that's going to mature in less than 90 days. So as I'm reading the tags, there is a cauliflower here called Snow Crown, and it matures in 50 days. So if I get that baby in there now, when am I going to be seeing cauliflower? I'm going to be seeing cauliflower in a month and a half, which really excites me. This cabbage, on the other hand, is an 80-day. So I'm going to be seeing a fruit size of 3 to 4 pounds. I'm not going to complain about that, but that cabbage is going to be giving me a full head in, say, okay, 30, 60 before Thanksgiving. Lettuce, I can keep going all the way up until next spring. So my lettuce says I can be starting to see a head of bib lettuce. So this is not a hard head of iceberg lettuce. This is a softer, fluffier head, which I prefer. And that's going to have stuff in 60 days. So all of this stuff really excites me. And then, of course, so I've got broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, collards, and lettuce. And then this last one I love is Swiss chard. This is a fun Swiss chard because it has, it is called Bright Lights, and it is golden, it is red, it is pink, it is purple, and it is green. I mean, there are different ones. And the fun part is if I pull them up, let me see it. Trust me, the color of the roots, if this is an orange plant, an orange chard, it's got orange roots. If it's a ruby chard, it's got ruby roots. It's amazing. So all of these things are things that I would be planting now. So this is all what's available right now out there. I'm not sure that I have heard that the box stores are not going to be having this stuff this year because it's really hard to get from the growers. So mind your P's and Q's with your local garden center and treat them really well, and hound them mercilessly until they get this stuff in. So I got mine up at Primex up in Glenside. I know that Greensgrow has their stuff. They're local in Philadelphia. I'm not sure about the outer line garden centers because I haven't been to any of them. But if you know that your garden center has this stuff, please let us know in the chat. What else can I be putting in? And what do I need to remember while I'm planting these? Let's talk about the cole crops because I got this white elephant in the room here that that no one has said anything about yet. But I made this little, I get terrible butterflies. It's a terrible thing to get too many butterflies. But we did a class earlier today, and during the class, not 7, count them, 7 cabbage butterflies came by. The little white ones that just, they're so beautiful, and they flit, and they flit, and they flit, and they flit, and they flit. And every time they flit, they're dropping an egg. They're just that fast, they're attaching an egg. And that egg hatches, and it makes a green worm, and the green worm will eat you down to nubs. So how do we keep that from happening without spraying the poop out of these guys? Well, we move all of my beautiful vegetables that I so dramatically swept aside. Move this guy into the picture. This is my bridal tent. What I have done is we're doing a container gardening project in Nicetown, and we're trying to figure out what is the best way to keep these plants safe. So what I have done is these are planted in a container. These are collard greens. You can see them, my little collard greens. And those are so attractive to the butterflies. So what I did was I stuck a broomstick in it, and I made a little veil. It's just Harvest Guard or Remay or row cover, it's called, or insect netting. And I just cut a piece of it, gathered the top of a rubber band, and stuck it on like a shower cap. And then I attached it here. It's open. It would not be open normally, but I brought it open so you could see what was going on inside of it. So this goes closed, and then I have it gathered at the bottom with a dollar store bungee cord. So this looks stupid as all get out, but it is so amazingly effective for keeping those guys in there pest free, because not only do I get terrible cabbage worms, 2 different kinds. Some of them are green and some of them look like upholstered furniture. I also get those wonderful harlequin bugs that are, they're stink bug, but they're beautiful orange, black, and white that will totally devastate your plants as well in all forms. So the adults, from the tiny little babies all through all of the developmental stages to the adults, every single one of them either sucks the juices out of your cabbage or eats them. So we want to keep them away at all costs. So although this looks ridiculous, it is amazingly effective for keeping the bugs off. Can you do this on a large scale in the garden? Sure. That's what those arches that we looked at when we when we were in the insect class. We did the hoops and then covered it like a tunnel and closed the edges with a rubber band or with a knot, so that the whole row is covered and does not let any of the bugs in. So does this make sense? Does anybody need to ask more about this? Where can you get this? I got this at my garden center. You can mail order it. It's called Row Cover. The brand name of the original kind is Remay, and if you look at it, it's really fine interfacing. And in fact, people were using this triple layered when they're making face masks when they couldn't get the interfacing. They were using this because it's a non-woven pressed fabric. So what else? Oh, okay. So that's my insect prevention tip for the day. And what I wanted to talk about is how to handle the transplant when I'm putting it in the ground, and then what can we be planting from seeds right now. So hot questions before I move on to that, Cassidy.
Yeah, we've got some questions. So Judy was asking about mulching. This was the last mulch question. Is root mulch better than bark mulch? Is there a difference?
Root mulch, is supposed to have some anti-fungicidal qualities, and yet when I pull it out of the bag, I like the right dress root mulch because it smells like licorice, and it's a local product. It's not from Canada. It's generally from Pennsylvania. It's got mushrooms growing in it, so I don't know how it has fungicidal anti-fungus qualities. It breaks down faster because it's ground up. I can't wait. I take that back because root mulch, bark mulch, I haven't seen a lot of difference in the quality of it. It's a matter of individual preference, but if sometimes you mulch based on the smell rather than the looks, the licorice mulch smells awesome, and then cocoa hull mulch, it will put you into total chocolate orgasms of the nose when you smell that stuff, because it's just like somebody spread hot cocoa all over your garden. Are any of them better? I find that except for the stuff that you avoid because it might have chemicals in it, and the stuff that you avoid because it doesn't break down too fast enough, or the stuff that you avoid because it's all personal preferences. And it's what's available and what's cheap, what's on sale.
So Barry is asking, of the stuff that you talked about planting right now, can they be started from seed, or is it better to start them from transplant? Just thinking about the timing.
I am still thinking about putting more broccoli in because I never have enough broccoli, and I never have enough bok choy. So those are things that I'm putting in from seed right now. I mean, I should be doing it today in my window box that I'm going to keep protected because I don't want it out in the sun. I want it to get enough light, but I want to keep it somewhat cooler until it gets started and it gets about this big. If you can get broccoli and cauliflower and cabbage from transplants, go with that. If you can't get them, then go with seed. But again, go with the seeds, read the packs, and make sure that what the seeds that you're going with are less than 90 days. Don't try to grow 110-day cauliflowers because you're not going to get them before Christmas.
All right, Sally. So I'm going to double up on a question from Patty and MS. So they're wondering, can you interplant some of these things that we're talking about growing with tomatoes that are you're still harvesting from this summer?
Oh, sure. But
also,
I'm sorry.
When should we think about like ripping out some of those summer plants to start making room for other things?
That's a tough decision because one of the things we're going to talk about later also is cover crops for the fall and winter, and green manures. And in order to put them in a timely fashion, we're going to have to pull out. We're going to have to be ruthless. So if all you're getting, if you have gotten tons and tons of tomatoes, and now your tomatoes the plants are looking peaked, and they're just not putting out the amount of tomatoes that you would like, then they're goners, and it's room for something else. I always have a terrible, terrible time. The tough love thing doesn't work for me. So what I try to do is, if my tomatoes are staked up, then on the edges of those same beds, I would be putting other things in. Like, for instance, I am harvesting I'm still harvesting potatoes, but next week, actually this week, I'm going to be on one side of my bed. That's where these guys are going to go. They're going to go in there, and even if I have to like put the hoops sideways on the bed, I'm going to do that to keep them covered while I'm waiting for the rest of the potatoes to be done. So I'm like finding spaces around things and tearing stuff out that either I'm tired of looking at it and it didn't bear what I wanted it to bear, or the groundhog ate the beans, so I'm going to rip the beans out and put something in there. So you have to, unless you're a really good tough love gardener, what you're going to do is you're going to patchwork things. And oh, this is the other thing that I found. And supposedly they have them at the Dollar Tree. When I can't get a whole row of cabbage or collards or something in, this is one of those collapsible laundry baskets that can go right over your plant, and it keeps your butterflies out and it keeps the harlequin bugs out. You have to put something like, I don't know, I put tent stakes in it to hold it down so the wind doesn't blow it around. But this can also, instead of like this guy over here is, I have him up with a broomstick. This one just goes right over the plant. So I'm going to be I already have them over my, my kale so that I could take the big cover off and get other things planted. So more questions on transplants. I wanted to talk about transplants. More questions before I get to the transplants? I'll take that as a no.
No, sorry, I had to unmute myself. Can we be starting turnips and radishes from seed now, or like fall herbs like cilantro and I feel like I always say this wrong, Chervil. Yeah.
Those any of the herbs can go in anytime. There are some that like the cool weather better. The parsley, well, not the whole parsley family, because so if I wanted to put chervil or cilantro, I would just put them from seed right in wherever there's space in the garden. And I would never start radishes from seed in a pot and then transplant them. Any of those, I don't understand why, because they really don't like to get transplanted. So any of those root crops, I have just planted carrots and beets. I planted dill, I planted Swiss chard, and I planted spinach. I think it's too early for the spinach, and it may be too early for most of the lettuces because the ground is just so hot. So again, I'm going to be using the light colored mulch. I watered the heck out of it before I put it in, and I just really pushed the mulch back about this far to put that row in there to keep the soil on either side of it cool. And I planted them on the shade side of the tomatoes. So where the tomatoes are this high, they're somewhat shading the back end of the row, and that's where I'm planting my really, really cool season stuff. The really cool season stuff that hates the heat: lettuce, spinach, probably the radishes. I'm going to do the turnips anyway. I'm going to try some in the shade and some in the sun. I said carrots. What else did I say? What are the root crops? I'm going to put some rutabagas in, although they're a longer season. I should have had them in the spring. I'm going to try them anyway. So all of that stuff that really likes the cool season, we're going to try a little bit now, because who knows, the heat could break and we could have, who knows with this weather anymore. So those are the things that I'm going to try now, and then I'm going to plant them again in a couple of weeks, and then I'm going to plant them again in a couple of weeks. So I might get a grab now. I might get a, it might be the next planting that does well, and it may be the third planting that does really well. But I'm like, it's like I'm buying insurance. I'm buying a little bit now and a little bit later and a little bit later with those guys. These can go in right now. Peas is another thing. They don't like the heat, so I'm gonna hold off on planting them for another couple of weeks. What else is there? I'm looking at my pile of, there are a lot of greens. Oh, I found this. I was really surprised. There's a container zucchini called Astia, A-S-T-I-A, and it says if I plant this, I can have zucchini in 48 days. I was like, oh my God. I grabbed that, and I'm going to put that in the ground because in this heat, if it's well watered, those seeds will be up in 3 days. It says 7 to 10 days to germinate. In this heat, in this hot soil, they're going to be coming up in 3 days. And in 48 days, I could have zucchini. I am excited by this. So I'm going to try that. We will know. I also have a little cucumber here that says 60 days. I'm going to take a chance on a few more cucumbers before. I know I said it's too late for that, but I'm going to give it a try. Peas I'm going to wait on. The greens I'm going to wait on. And I have tried a mesclun mix, which is a mix of lettuces and greens. It's lettuces and mustards, and maybe some Swiss chard thrown in there that are just for cut and come again. I'm going to try them. I'm going to try them and see what happens. But they said that I could be having, I could be eating out off of this stuff in 40 days. There is a caterpillar climbing across my keyboard right now. I wish that you could see it. It's adorable. What else am I? So I'm putting in, I'm starting some greens. I'm starting some of those things. But the herbs you can put in anytime. I'm going to plant some more basil from seed because you don't need it to get to maturity to eat it. You can, I mean, your basil can be this big and you can be eating leaves off it. So the same thing with thyme, with the only herbs you don't are the herbs that you want to get to the flowers of. So chamomile, it might be a little late to plant that now, but dill, I plant that every 2 weeks. I love this stuff. I can't get enough. And I'm going to try, again, like I said, I'm going to plant things now. I'm going to take a chance and try to shade them and try to protect them. But I'm going to try them now. And then in a couple weeks, I'm going to, all the way up into the first week of October, I can be planting all of that stuff and still have it be mature enough before it hits 20 degrees that I can be eating it.
Sally, when you're planting from seed, you're straight up planting in the ground, right? You're not potting up.
Straight up planting in the ground. Again, like with the transplants, I'm going to dig a hole. I'm going to water the hole. I'm going to throw some compost in. Doesn't matter whether I throw the compost in and put the water in or the other way around. But I'm going to dig a hole with compost and water, and then I'm going to plant, and then I'm going to close up over it and water a little bit more. But I'm going to water the hole because that's going to make sure that the roots don't skip a beat. And then the same thing with the seeds. I'm going to dig my trench or prepare my bed, and I'm going to water it well, and then I'm going to sprinkle the seeds either in the row or in the wide row, and then I'm going to cover them lightly with soil. So I'm going to make sure that I water well first, then put the seeds in, then cover. Now I can afford to do that because my soil is soft and full of organic matter. If what I've got is straight clay, then what I want to do is dig the trench, throw in some compost, water it, plant, and cover it over, water again, and pray, because the clay is going to make it. I have to make sure that the clay doesn't glaze the top of the soil, so that when the plants come up, they can't get through the crust. So here's what I've got. I wanted to show. I bought these cabbage, and they came in some of them come in a 6-pack. So you see a 6-pack, and you can pull out one whole thing and plant it. So that's how you would handle it. With the ones that come out in one wad like this, they all come out in one big thing. You want to tease the roots apart. You really want to be careful to separate. And then again, you would gently separate, because you want them to retain as much root as you can as you divide those. And then when I put them in my, when I plant them up, I want to plant them at the same level. Now with tomatoes, remember when we planted tomatoes back in the spring, we planted them all the way up till their necks. With these guys, we want to plant them at about the level that they came out of the pot or out of the market pack. So I'm going to put this in, and I'm not going to hill it up to here. I'm just going to put the soil up to the same, to this level. And then I'm going to, like I said, I dig the hole, I add some compost, I water the hole, I put this in, and then I tap down, but not tap down like this. I tap it down gently because I don't want air pockets down there. And then I'm going to water gently again to make sure that I don't have air pockets. Air pockets down there are, I have a yellow jacket that's been deciding to be my friend today. And I would have gotten rid of it, but here's something wonderful that I saw as I was setting up for the class, was a yellow jacket taking away an adult lanternfly. And it was like, thank you, you may stay and you may come to my class and I will not be afraid of you. So I'm excited. I was excited to see that because I didn't know there was anything that did in the lanternflies. So when do I fertilize? If I have added compost, then I really don't need to fertilize much. What I can do with this new stuff, I probably would want to, because I'm using my compost as a time-release fertilizer, I wouldn't necessarily need a fertilizer, but with my stuff that's still growing, let me finish with this and then, no, while we're on fertilizer. This is something that I might add. I might now, if I had an organic fertilizer, I might side dress my tomato and pepper and squash plants, where I draw a circle about 6 inches out from the plant. So I'm making a circle about a foot around, where I just am sprinkling the fertilizer and then scratching it in gently, either with my hands or with a cultivator, not deeply, but gently, so that as the rain comes, it carries it down to the periphery of the roots, because that's where most of the root hairs are. So I might be side dressing with some fertilizer or watering with my worm compost, my compost tea. This is a really good thing to be watering. I would dilute this, not use it straight. I would dilute this, and that's the second watering that I do. So I'm filling the hole, I'm digging the hole, I'm putting the compost and the water in, I'm planting the plant, I'm tapping it down, and then I would water with the compost tea. So I'm introducing new microorganisms into the soil at the same time that I'm watering and making sure that there are no air pockets. And that, I think, is enough of a boost. Now, right away, after I get the cole crops in, I want to have them covered in some way because, like I said, I was here this morning, 7 butterflies came into the yard searching for my plants. So I want to make sure I'm going to inspect them and make sure that they're pristine, and then I'm going to put them in the cover. Then I'm going to check them. Words are sometimes tough for me. I'm going to check them periodically to make sure that I didn't miss any. Like in case when I went in to eat my lunch, butterfly came by and laid some eggs. I want to check in a week to make sure that no green worms are inside my protected area. So I have, we talked about fertilizer, what we're picking, side dressing, mulching, harvesting.
Sally, wait, really quick. What's the name of the fertilizer you are using?
This is an Osmocote of some sort, which is a time-release fertilizer. It's because it looked like a fertilizer that I grabbed it because I needed something that looked like a fertilizer for the last class. What you want is something that is, read the numbers, because organic or inorganic, they're all going to have the numbers on them. And you want like something gentle, like a 3-4-5 or 5-4-3 or something, not an outrageously high first number, which is nitrogen, because I'm trying to get whole plant growth, not just leaf growth. So if I'm using a side dressing, then I want something with fairly even 3 numbers. If I'm using one of the add to water ones, they might be 10-10-10 or 20-20-20. Then I would like to, instead of read the directions and it'll say a tablespoon to a gallon of water, I would use a 1/2 tablespoon to a gallon of water and water once, and then in a week water with the other half in a week, because I don't want to, if I'm using water soluble fertilizer, I don't want to overwhelm the biology that's in the soil. I want to give it a little bit of a boost, but I don't want to add a whole lot of salty stuff to it. So I'm going to use a more dilute form of liquid fertilizer. And again, I cannot stress enough, you gotta, if you're planting this stuff this time of year, because it's already gonna be a little stressed out from the heat, you wanna make sure that you are excluding the insects, because the insects like a weakened plant, they like a stressed plant. They don't have to chew as hard, because it's more carbohydrates to a stressed plant rather than proteins. So like I said, they don't have to chew as hard to eat a stressed plant. So let's get these guys in the ground and get them covered so that we're not out there spraying to keep the bugs down.
So Judy's asking, what should we do to augment my soil in my raised beds before planting seeds and plants for fall?
Compost, 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 compost.
When you're planting every few weeks, do you buy the seedlings now in bulk, knowing what you're going to, like what you're trying to plant? Or
These guys,
buy them when they're ready? Like,
okay. I'm grabbing these up now because if they're available now, they might not be available. I don't know if anyone has noticed, but the garden centers are having a terrible time getting supplies. The supply chain is broken in so many different ways because of COVID, that if you see the plants, you get the plants and you guard them with your life. I'm keeping mine, this is sad, I'm keeping mine in the back of my truck right now because I can't afford for the groundhogs. If I set them on this table, they will find them on this table. So I'm keeping them right now in the back of my truck to keep them safe. But these are things that you want to get in the ground now, because they are developing slowly over a longer period of time. These are not something that I plant now and then plant in 2 weeks and plant in 2 weeks. The stuff that I'm planting in 2 weeks is the greens, the lettuces and things like that. I'm planting them from seed. I'm trying them from seed now. I'm taking a chance. I'm not going to get my best crop out of these, but I might get my soonest crop out of these. Then in 2 weeks, I'm going to plant more. And then in 2 weeks, I'm going to plant more. And even if I'm just putting pinches here and there and everywhere, or in my window boxes or wherever, I am trying to succession crop these. The greens, the lettuces, the bok choys, the mesclun mix, that's all stuff that I am going to put now, and then succession crop. So these guys, because I'm getting them now because they're available now because it's ready to go in the ground now. So get them in the ground now.
wait, Sally, this is a great question that just came in. Why does mold grow on mulch?
Mold is a fungus, and funguses grow fine in soil, and it's not particularly a problem unless it is, unless you're seeing like a lot of mushroom growth, because that might not be healthy for your, usually the problem is when your mulch is in a pile, and so that it's setting up a wonderful situation for the mold to grow, the mycelium to go in through all of it. But once it's spread out on the soil, it becomes much less critical mass, I guess you could say. So it's not the ideal conditions for the growth. It was funny. We got a load of in my community garden. We got a load of chips in from Fairmount Park, and the month after we spread them out, we suddenly had all of these tiny little orange mushrooms, like this big, that looked like little, well, they looked like little weenies sticking up out of the soil. And they eventually stopped growing, but they were not poisonous, and we didn't eat them anyway. But they don't really hurt what's going on, and they help the mulch to break down much faster, because that's the purpose of the fungus, is to break down the wood fiber. We are having an interesting, especially if you are anywhere near where there used to be restaurants, we're hearing reports from gardens to say that the rats have been moving into the gardens because the restaurants are not doing the business that they were, so they're not throwing away as much garbage as they were.
Right.
So the rats are roaming looking for more food. So what we have to make sure is that we are not making any situation be comfortable for the rats in our gardens. So our compost bins, we need to be turning the compost bins. Okay, because a rat needs a place to hide. So they like to go around edges and they like to be under things. They don't like to run. If they run across, you see them run really fast because they don't like to be out in the open. They're too exposed. So they want to be able to be hidden. They need a source of water, a source of food, and a place to raise their young. So in order to raise their young, they're making permanent places. So we have to make sure that we don't have permanent places for them. They especially like wood piles. They like brush piles. They like a place that they're not going to be disturbed. So if we have compost bins, we need to make sure that our compost is constantly disturbed so that they can't be getting comfortable there. And that's the best thing that we can do, because face it, we've got food, and if this is the only food that's available, they're going to come and they're going to take a bite out of your tomato.
They actually, well, they're in pots. They didn't eat my herbs, and they didn't eat kale in the spring. So they actually didn't eat that. They dug a hole under one of my raised beds.
Yeah, they're trying to find a permanent place to raise their babies.
And under my chimney outside, they dug a hole, believe it or not. So that was weird.
Yeah, so rats are, for all the bad rap we give them, they're very, very good parents. And so they are, they're doing their best to try to make sure their babies are safe. So what we need to do is to say, okay, fine, you have your babies somewhere else, or don't have babies this time, just not in my yard.
I hate killing things. But
yeah, but I don't want rats.
No, it's scary. It's very scary. Oh my God.
So we're on some covering conversations in the chat.
Let's talk about the covering, because I saw a couple of those go by. If you have already planted your cabbage family, so your kale, your collards, your stuff, and it's been exposed to the elements, that means that the butterflies have found it. There's a guarantee. The butterflies have found it. So what you need to do is you need to be inspecting you need to inspect the leaves. These are pretty pristine. I would pull one out and show you what an egg looks like. Okay, all right. I'm not going to get microscopic, but let's see how, yeah, you can't see it. There is a bug here. There is a tiny worm right here, so small that you can barely see it. But I know it's there, so I'm going to do this, and now it's not there. It's like magic. So I have gone through and inspected, but better than that, what I'm going to do is I am going to use, before I put them out, I'm going to use a general yeah, again, it's too small for you to see. I'm going to spray them before I put them out with a generic, not insecticidal soap, because that won't do it. I might spray them with neem, or spray them with Dr. Doom's organic, blah, 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 blah. But I want to spray them with something that is for chewing insects. So neem, or something that has BT in it, Bacillus thuringiensis, because that's what kills the caterpillars. I'm going to spray them before I put them out to make sure that they are absolutely pristine before I put the cover. I'm pointing over here to the cover, which you can't see anymore, but trust me, my little bridal tent is there, keeping my collard greens safe. So I want to make sure that they're perfectly clean before I cover them. So if your kale is out there, yeah, inspect it. If you are not sure, inspect them anyway and then cover them up. Yeah. Another question came in about, I love that. It's, from now forward, we'll be calling this a bridal tent. And you may all freely use that. If you have never had a garden before, the butterflies are still, they will check you out. Their radar is amazing. If you've ever seen a butterfly, then yes, they will get you, and yes, you need to cover your stuff. Otherwise, you're just going to have to be, you're gonna have to be constantly, I have words in order. I have in my garden 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 collard plants. Of the ones that the groundhog has not eaten, I have found green worms on every single one of them. I had covered them, but I didn't cover them. I didn't spray them first, and I didn't inspect. I thought I had inspected them first, but I was in a hurry. I got them in the ground. I covered them over, and I didn't uncover them for 4 weeks. So what I did was I had effectively made a shield of protection over my bugs. And hadn't checked them because they were in the far side of the garden. So shame on me. The caterpillars ate them, and there hadn't been a garden there in 10 years. So yeah, there is no safety net except a safety net. There is also insect screening, and I don't have any of it here, but it looks like curtain material, and it's very effective as well. But you got to make sure that there are no openings in it. So don't uncover it and leave it uncovered for the day thinking, oh, they needed more air and light, because no, they got more bugs. So don't do that.
Natalie, what was that leaf mulch or that like stuff that you talked about?
We call it leaf mold. It's just old leaves. And I got it because, well, God bless America, they were giving it away free on the street last fall, like in plentitude. People think that if they put a bag, especially in the city, I don't know about the burbs, people think if they put a bag of leaves out on the street, then someone will collect it and it will go to, no, it goes to landfill. The city does not have a leaf collection by bags. So what I do is when I see them in plastic bags, so that I can see what's in them and see that there are no dead squirrels in them or car parts or things like that, I bring them home. And I have been using them I use them to insulate my fig tree. So I will take my bags of mulch that is dry leaves, and I'll pile it against my fig tree for the winter, and then in the spring I take it away, and that becomes my carbon when I build my new compost bin. So I have a bag of leaves next to my compost bin, so I put my garbage in, and then I take a handful of leaves and I put that in. So people call that leaf mulch, they call it leaf mold, they call it a lot of different things, but effectively it's old dried leaves. What kind of soil do you use for pigs and pomegranates? Figs and pomegranates. Figs and pomegranates, I don't know. So that sounds like a good internet search to find that out. There is a man in upstate Pennsylvania, and it's worth a search to find out who he is, that has been breeding pomegranates and figs and dates that are hardy to Pennsylvania. And so my neighbors have a pomegranate tree that is hardy here in zone 7, and they have now had 2 pomegranates, and it's just August. So that's exciting. My fig tree is in whatever soil, and it's a Chicago fig, so it is hardy here in Pennsylvania, doesn't die back to the ground, and it is totally covered in little baby figs right now. So should I be putting more compost in the soil? Probably would be better for it. But right now I jammed it up against the house because it was a safe place to put it when I moved in 15 years ago, and it's still there. So compost. Anila, black fabric in the garden. Who's putting black fabric in their garden? Why would we use black fabric in the garden? I don't know of an occasion when we would. Some people use a black fabric, a synthetic fabric as a landscape cloth. I don't recommend using landscape cloth ever. You're using it as a mulch to keep weeds down, and then covering it with organic mulch. And what it does is it keeps the weeds for the first year from coming up, but by the second year the weeds are coming through it anyway, and then you can't pull it up. So it's there and it's synthetic. So Not something that I recommend, but other people have used it and been happy. How do I keep locusts from eating my green tomatoes? Depending on what we're calling locusts. Generally, people call cicadas locusts, and they don't eat tomatoes. There are big grasshoppers that are also called locusts, and I haven't seen them here yet, so I don't know that they would be eating the tomatoes. What does eat tomatoes, tomato leaves, is tomato hornworm, and it is laid by a moth that is a night flying moth, and it's beautiful, and it's about this big, and it comes and it lays its eggs at night, and they grow into a worm that has a horn, and they're so big that you don't know whether you could step on them or shoot them, or ride on them or harvest them for power. But they are so big, and they have a little horn on the back, and sometimes they have stripes depending on if they're the tobacco hornworm or the tomato hornworm. Both will eat our tomatoes. Generally, what you do is you pick them off with a pair of pliers if you're afraid to touch them, because they're sometimes this big around, and step on them. Or if you see little white cocoons on the back of it, leave them alone, because it means they've been parasitized and they'll be dead soon, and they have become the host for those wasps that go and eat more of these worms. So that's what, if something is eating your leaves down to nubs, it's probably a hornworm, and you need to look closely for them because they're exactly the same color as the tomato leaf. If something is eating your tomatoes themselves, that's probably a squirrel, because the squirrels are thirsty, and what they're doing is they're taking a bite and sucking the juices out. So you can cut around that and continue and eat, because they only eat they don't like the green ones, they like the ripe ones. If something is eating your green tomatoes, I have no clue. I don't know what does that. And now I'm backing up. Suddenly I am like, way sunny. Something's eating my hot pepper plants. Looks like deer, but thought they leave hot. Deer don't let anything alone. I think, I think that hot pepper plants, the peppers concentrate the hotness at the back end, at the seed end of the tomato, because you can have a hot pepper and you can sometimes be eating all the way up to here before you hit real hotness. So I don't think that the leaves of the plants have the hotness in them. So what you need to do is you need to, if what you're trying to do is take advantage of your hot pepper plants to have the deer not eat them, is you have to make a sauce out of and spray it all over the leaves, and respray it every time it rains, after the rain. I don't know who's eating your green tomatoes. Do you have groundhogs? That's something that that eats anything. They don't have any. They just eat. Talking about trimming back your tomato plants. This is the third time I've gotten this question today. In the last 2 days. I don't trim my tomato plants back unless they're getting so big that they're in the way. What my friend Ed does, and Ed grows kick-ass tomatoes. Ed thins out his tomato plants. So he takes all the side branches and suckers out, and then pulls his straight up so that the whole plant is totally exposed to the sun. So that there's my yellow jacket back again. Oh no. If you've got indeterminate tomatoes, there's determinate tomatoes which grow to a certain height, stop, and ripen up all their tomatoes. And it will tell you on the seed pack whether it's determinate or indeterminate. Indeterminate will continue to grow until the cows come home, or till they freeze. So if you had, let me see if I can get, the sun is moving and it is like ruthless here. Okay, there we go. We'll get to see another tree. And now I lost my train of thought. Oh, pruning back tomatoes. What you've done is you're going to pinch the ends off of the branches to try to get them to thicken up. And when they thicken up, they're not necessarily going to get more tomatoes because it's the new growth that tends to get the tomatoes on an indeterminate tomato. So pruning them back will ripen up the tomatoes that are already there, but it's not going to produce more flowers necessarily. And what it will do is it will make your suckers grow more, and then your plant becomes denser and it gets less light and less airflow. So I don't recommend the pruning of tomatoes. Some people swear by it, but let them swear by it. I don't do it. Back to the 10-10-10 fertilizer. What is that for? 10-10-10 is a fertilizer that has got a lot of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in it in proportion to the filler material that is used. And you would use a 10-10-10 early in the spring. If you were, say, just starting your containers and you wanted to boost them up with fertilizer for the spring, you could mix a 10-10-10 in it and then mix it in the soil so that it's spread throughout the soil. 10-10-10 is not something that I would side dress with now unless it's a water diluted. If it's one that's for mixing with water, then a 10-10-10 is fine, but use half strength. Commercial paper mulch designed for the garden. Is it better or is it better? Is it better than grocery bags? Nothing is better than grocery bags because I have a lot of them and they came from the store for free. And right now, unless I can recycle them, I would rather reuse them than recycle them. So if I have a supply of brown paper bags, I would never go out and buy commercial paper mulch. Unless, okay, I have seen some of the commercial mulch, the paper mulch, because it is, it's coated, not coated, coded, C-O-D-E-D. So that means it has pictures on it to say plant here, plant here, plant here. If what you're using that for is a guide, and that's what it was originally designed for, then that's a fun thing, especially with kids. But other than that, I would use brown bags. How big should a fig be before it's harvested? It's not a matter of size, it's a matter of softness. So if you don't know your figs and your figs are starting to get soft, pull one off and bite into it and you'll know if it's ripe, and you'll teach yourself by the third fig what's ripe and what's not ripe. So it's not waiting for them to get big enough, it's waiting for them to get ripe enough. So I love you all, but if you've got no more questions, I'm going to take my mosquito-laden body into the house, out of this, and Cassidy can go and have her go to sleep because it's past her bedtime. And I want you all to be to go out and garden, enjoy the heck out of your garden. If you haven't joined the Horticultural Society yet, why not get on that page, phsonline.org. Come on, you've been on this free ride for all these weeks. It's time to pay the piper. Get up there and become a member. And while you're at it, sign up for Harvest 2020. Because we want all of our gardens. 10,000 gardeners have stepped forward to be counted. And if you have not been counted yet, it's time. And it doesn't cost you anything, although you can donate to the cause. I know that this next week we're going to be doing, we're doing a container project because people donated enough that we were able to give out container gardening kits in North Philadelphia to a bunch of folks in 4 zip codes so that they can grow their own fall crops. So I thank you if you've joined and if you've become a member and if you've donated to that cause, because 50 gardeners are going to get kits to grow their own fall crops. If you're in 1944, are you in 44 or 29, Leslie? Okay. Okay. All right. I will send you the link because tell your neighbors about it. They could be getting pots and plants.
I sure will.
Okay. So get out there, sign up, get counted. Be safe, wear a mask, and eat lots of fresh vegetables. And I love you all. And I'll see you next week when we're talking about seed saving and seed keeping and the stories behind the plants that we grow.